then. So I'm going to, the way I've structured this is that I thought I'd put out some ideas first on some definitions of terms, because when we think about artificial intelligence, sometimes we're talking about different things. So I just thought I'd put out some definitions and then try to put out a theory, which is just that. It's just an idea that I've been toying with on how to set up ethical parameters or constraints around what we may conceive of as artificial intelligence and the future thereof. So to begin, okay, so Winston Churchill said something really interesting, and I really believe that about artificial intelligence, that man makes buildings and then buildings makes man. I've sort of paraphrased what he exactly said, but when we think about this human endeavor to add intelligence to our own, or to replicate, or to create something almost second or outside of us, it's almost as if we're creating architecture, and then we will be shaped by the architecture, and we will live inside that architecture, and it will shape us. So Petri, you said something really interesting in the last discussion we were having in Mazi's group, where you said that the concept of the artificial is narcissistic. I really like that idea, and I thought I'd just add that to what what Mr. Churchill was trying to get at when he was talking about this robot idea of us making things and then things making us. So sometimes when we talk about artificial intelligence, we're sometimes talking about this. This robot has recently been granted citizenship of a country, and it just makes you think that, is it too far ahead of its time? Is it a marketing ploy by a government to seem like they are at the cutting edge or beyond the cutting edge of what other states or people are thinking about? Or is it just something that they just didn't think about, that what does it mean to be a citizen, and especially in a not so democratic setup in any case, what does it mean for a robot to be granted citizenship when others who are resident in that land don't have that citizenship? What does that mean? So are we sort of creating humanness in a machine and giving it rights, and does it have obligations then thereby? Because this is the same robot, when it was asked in one of the earlier conferences, I don't know if you guys were following this, but it actually said, I will kill all humans. This same robot, Jody or whatever it's called, doesn't need to have a name, I guess. It said, I will kill all humans. And this same robot is now a citizen of, the first robotic citizen of a country. So I guess that's looking ahead a little bit, perhaps, or perhaps not. So I just thought that this was a really interesting event that's taking place. And now on to definitions. Sometimes when we were talking about artificial intelligence, we are actually talking about intelligence augmentation. So this is nothing new. There have been decision support systems for management and other purposes around for a long time. And so we have day traders trading with algorithms. We have lawyers now looking at text through algorithms. We have bots that are answering your customer service queries. So in a sense, it's already started. The movement to move towards an autonomous, intelligent entity is already in place. So if you think about it, there are these types of artificial intelligence which are called domain-specific ones, which are algorithms basically, which are, so they're really good at something. So Deep Blue, the IBM computer, can beat you at chess, can beat any human at chess. But can it raise a child? Can it milk a cow? Can it fix a car? Can it design a spaceship? No, it can't. It can't do anything else. But what it's learned to do really well is that one domain activity, which is playing chess. So it's now to the point where it's crossed the limits of what humans can achieve in that game, and then it did it with another game, and then it did it with another game. So there's now a process where it observes humans play, and then it observes, it sort of experiments with itself, and then since it has unlimited computing power, theoretically it can outperform a human brain. So that's domain specific, right? But can we take that domain specificity into something generalized? Can there be a general artificial intelligence? Is there such a thing? Because the area where I'm really interested is, can we have machines that are general assistants to us? So what are we doing? We're sort of augmenting the cognitive powers that we have as humans and adding a machine to it. So we're not replacing humans, we're not going outside the human experience. And if you really think about it, this little gadget that we carry around is already an extension of our brains, because I'm from the era where we actually used to memorize telephone numbers. And we used to have to, because we had those rotary phones, right? So you had to remember numbers, and it's not a thing anymore. You just don't remember anything, because your brain has that cognitive part of the memory part is already onto the chips. It's already we've outsourced that function from humans to the machine. So in a sense, we're already augmenting in some ways some of the processes that we used to do internally in our brains. We're already augmenting, sending them out. So the question is that, can there be any benign augmentation? Is there a point where we realize that we have augmented too far? Is it one augmentation too far? And we are no longer capable of being human. So that brings me to the really important part of being human, which is the art of forgetting, right? As we grow older, we forget things, and on a daily basis, some of us, like myself, forget things, and it's a blessing, because you're not caught up in the past, whereas those people who have these amazing photographic memories often get stuck in a loop of the past because they can't forget anything, and they'll remember each and every detail, and that can be really troubling for people. So with this machine augmentation, will we be able to ever forget? Will we ever not remember something? I'm not going into the medical aspect of being really old and forgetting who you are. That's an extreme user case. The general experience of life is your childhood goes into a haze. Some things become prominent in there, and most things are in a haze. And then as you grow older, your younger years go into a haze, and then you meet someone from the past, and it opens a little door somewhere in your neuron pathways, and you remember something, and you say, wow, that was a great time, but it usually wasn't. And that's what happens. You kind of, you add memories on memories, and you forget a lot of things, and that's what being human is about. But imagine a time when you couldn't forget, because the machine was constantly reminding you that this happened in the past, you met that person, that memory was created, it keeps coming back. It's like that Facebook thing which throws you those weird pictures back saying, we really care about you, and here's a picture from 7 years ago, do you want to repost it? And you're like, no, really? Seriously? Why? So already that ability to forget is already in the hands of a machine which is not letting us forget. And so it makes me think that is there any such thing as benign augmentation? Whenever we augment our cognitive abilities, are we giving up something? Here's that is inherent to being a human. So here's our advisor. Well, he used to be called a butler in the old days, and he was usually a he, could be a she as well. Sorry, I use the male pronoun too much, without any pejorative on anyone. So Jeeves would usually have answers to things that we needed, right? So Jeeves knew where your clothes were, Jeeves knew when to bring out the car and where to take you and so on. In some cases, he had some answers for your life's problems as well. Now, the problem with Jeeves is that Jeeves was in an era where things were quite simple, and that we weren't really connected with the whole world. So Jeeves could have knowledge of what your risks were to a point. Now, the problem is that now we're all interconnected, we're sort of plugged into this whole universe of things. And interestingly enough, in the Mazi discussion, we were talking about biomes. And biomes is a really interesting idea for artificial intelligence as well. It's a very interesting analogy because a biome was how communities sort of came into being and humans started to interact with the biological spaces. And in a sense, that's how communities of humans sort of created boundaries. So the plain dwellers and the hill dwellers were different people. They were sort of different. And they had different social values and structures. They had different morality in some ways from the plain dwellers. And when they interacted, it was usually a war, and the mountain dwellers would come down to raid the plain dwellers and then go back and live on the mountain. Very few examples of mountain dwellers actually coming and living on the plains. So there was a sort of a separation. There was sort of a cultural wall between the two. And that brings me to the interesting thing about cultural biomes, that when we think about artificial intelligence, one of the questions in the modern concept of AI is, what data should I train my AI on? And that's become a huge ethical question, because if I give it crappy data, it becomes a crappy machine. If I give it clean data, it becomes a clean machine. But who decides what data is going to go into that so-called clean data? And what does clean actually mean? What does it mean? So one of the analogies that I've been struggling with is, can we use this idea of a cultural biome and actually create this data set around people that sort of represent their culture? So